a couple of those bottles of water. I think we had
a forest
looked like a sports game yesterday.
there was one used one from yesterday, but that one on the coaster is the one that I.
All right. Camera live. Good morning, everyone. I want to especially welcome our students in attendance today. This is the second installment of our Presidential Search Committee interviews. Dr. Tyler Fisher is here today with us from Orlando. I want to welcome Dr. Fisher and invite him to make some opening remarks to our students. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, David. Well, again, I thank the students as well for those who came out this morning, and I appreciate your time and your attention in the midst of a busy semester. My name is Tyler Fisher. I was born and raised just an hour south of here in Fort Myers, and I went on to attend the University of Central Florida. I'm very much a product of the State University system of Florida. In 2003, I became the first Rhodes Scholar, and so far the only one, but I hope that's not the case for much longer. But the first Rhodes Scholar from the University of Central Florida, which allowed me to do my master's and my doctorate at the University of Oxford in England, where I was a student at Oxford's Magdalen College. As a doctoral student, I studied medieval and modern languages with an emphasis on Spanish. I never expected to stay in the UK for as long as I did, but I ended up staying on to teach at the universities of Oxford, later at the University of London. And after 15 years of living in England, studying and teaching there, and gaining some of my early administrative experiences, President John C. Hitt of the University of Central Florida invited me to consider coming back to UCF for a faculty position. Because as he persuaded me, I could do more good back at UCF than I could in London or Oxford. So I came back to UCF in 2018, and I've been there since. At UCF, my primary roles have been advising students for major competitive international scholarships, such as the Rhodes Scholarship, the Marshall Scholarship, nationally with the Truman Scholarship, and other scholarships that support students for graduate study. Now, I suppose implied in this invitation to introduce myself, there's the question of why do I want to be president of New College? I mentioned that I'm very much the product of the State University system of Florida, but when I went to Oxford, it really opened my eyes to the profound value of small group, tutorial style teaching. And I knew that's what New College had. So when I saw this opportunity, I thought, there's a place that combines my two ideals of a university. It's supported by the state system, a state that recognizes that universities are a public good. And it maintains that tradition of intensive small group learning, tutorial style learning in that great Socratic tradition. So I thought this would be a chance to really forward my ideals of the university in a setting that's very much home, and yet combines all the best that the oldest English-speaking university has to offer. So that's what I see for New College. And students, I prepared a one-page handout for this forum, so I just have put some key points there, but it outlines what might be something of a sketch of my vision for New College, as well as some other takeaway points.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. And just a reminder to our students who already know, I'm your Dean of Students, David Rancourt. And also the forum here is set up very informally. It's our desire to make you feel welcome and have a conversation. Obviously, we have an audience and live, both live and on the internet, so we're both mindful of that. We do have some questions from the students here today. We have some questions carrying over from yesterday. I'm trying to balance a little bit of both in fairness to those who have already interviewed and those who have not. So some of the questions are directly from the students today, some will come from yesterday. So,
all right.
Okay, thank you. You ready to jump in? Okay. Right. Dr. Fisher, I'm sure you've viewed social media and news coverage of New College of Florida in the past few months. What would you say to a reporter about your presidency at New College and the changes you would make or plan to make as president?
Yes, thank you for that question. That is so urgent, really, because as you're all aware, the college's reputation is very vulnerable right now on social media, on the broader public media. And so that would be something that I would want to address from the very beginning. In fact, you'll see that it's the first point under my extramural strategies for how we can achieve a very positive vision for New College. And I actually borrowed this from one of the New College strategic plans, where the first point was to tell New College's story. And I think we need to do that very proactively, very cautiously, so that we do tell the story to the media and the broader public. And to do that, I think it's not just posting more on social media. It's actually appointing perhaps key officers, key staff members, and members of the faculty who know how to translate the good things that are going on here to the outside world, as it were, and to actually break down that barrier between the ivory tower and the rest. So this really touches on something that is more widely urgent in the university context, and that is this general distrust of institutions, this town and gown tension that is as old as the University of Oxford. That's always been with us. And so we have a key opportunity to combat that by curating and packaging the kind of teaching that goes on here and the kind of research that goes on here, translating it for an interested audience that has enough education and interest to follow along, but to combat those caricatures and those stereotypes. So that would be actually, from the beginning, that would be part of the initial plan.
Thank you. Next question. Describe how you will ensure the LGBTQ population at New College that they are just as respected and welcome at NCF as anyone else.
That is so important. You're referring to a demographic that feels very vulnerable, and so the college, as they would for any population that is feeling a sense of vulnerability, should strive to make them feel welcome, but not to treat them as different. That is part of the reason why they feel vulnerable, because they've been treated as outliers. So to ensure that they are incorporated and integrated into the college activities, and that they are very much represented and valued. I like to think a lot about the concept of access. It has to do with the state university system's commitment to public higher education, that it's access and it's accessible to anyone regardless of their background, regardless of their identities. And New College, not just in terms of that broader commitment to public higher education access, but it's access to education that is excellent. And it is Florida's public honors college. And so for those students, no matter their background, no matter their demographic identities, they have the same access to that. And they can find dignity here and worth, and they can find a college that welcomes free expression.
Thank you. As president, if you were speaking to a prospective student and or their parents, what would you say to them as to why they, as a student, should choose New College?
Speaking to a prospective student or a prospective parent or both, New College has distinctives, and those are distinctives that I would champion, and I would ensure that they are preserved. I've already mentioned the intensive one-on-one or small group teaching, the tutorial style teaching in small classes, that wonderful student-faculty ratio that we want to preserve. That's one distinctive. But also the way that it is and has been since the founding of New College. It's been about students taking responsibility for their education and attaining mastery with a self-driven education. So I would point out that we have at New College no letter grades, no number grades. It is a narrative evaluation. That's actually something else I came to value at Oxford, and it's so healthy for the student and faculty relationship. Because at Oxford, your tutor, your professor, is not the one who examines you. You meet week by week or every other week. You look at your essay, you have a deep conversation about that essay, what you're learning about. But ultimately, the professor is like the coach in your corner. She or he is preparing you to go on to the university exams, which are centralized. So the student can never say, is this going to be on the test? Because the tutor doesn't make the test, at least not every year. Tutors take turns making the test, but no one knows who makes the tests. And so that means that the student and the professor are in a much more collaborative relationship. And I think having narrative evaluations is very much achieving the same thing. The independent study projects are also something I would want to preserve. And those independent study projects that the students undertake in the January terms, they culminate in the senior thesis. Again, a capstone experience that I would prioritize. And that's what I would, tell the prospective student and the prospective parent. This is something that you're not necessarily going to get at every state university.
Thank you. Sort of a carry-on to that, what past experiences can you identify that most or best prepare you to be president of not only New College, but any college or university?
Certainly. Well, a couple of my main administrative experiences were first directing the study abroad program for the University of London, specifically at University College London. And that involved sending an average of 350 students abroad every year, because students in modern languages had to spend a year abroad in their target language or split the year between their target languages. Most of them actually did 2 languages for their degree. And they went off to 27 different countries across 5 different continents. And that required a great deal of administrative effort, and also to make sure that those students weren't just sent out and able to thrive in their host countries, whether they were studying at a university or working at one of our many internship partnership companies, but that they were also able to come back and reintegrate into the college for the final year of their degree. And I worked on both sides of making sure that that program was improved, and it did increase our retention rates at University College London, and it meant and actually improved the students' language tests upon their return. I was also heavily involved with the Iraqi Kurdish State University system, and I'm very proud to have helped lead their first humanities program in that state university system in Iraqi Kurdistan. This was from 2011, and I wrapped up my role there in 2018. And that involved wearing a number of different hats, learning how to represent those universities to the regional government in that autonomous, semi-autonomous region. It involved pivoting rapidly from some of the things that we thought we prioritized to suddenly having to react to the rise of the so-called Islamic State, and trying to preserve some of the culture and voices of the people that were most affected by that, specifically the Yazidis who were targeted for genocide. So in the midst of trying to establish a humanities program there, we had ISIS right at the border there. One of the images that I'll never forget was seeing the flocks of sheep being driven out in the mornings, beautiful flocks of white sheep. And they would come back in the evenings and they would be black because of the munitions, because of the oil wells burning. And that was a striking image while we were. But it reminded me too of how university education is a legacy that we are stewarding, and it can withstand the trends and the upheavals of human history. When I was at Magdalen College, Oxford, we could go down in the cellar of the college, and you could still see calculations in chalk that the professors and students had written on the wall when they were hiding there during the Blitz, during the blackouts, and they carried on their teaching and learning. New College is in a state of transition, and we can steward that legacy. We can make sure that the learning and teaching carries on here successfully.
Thank you, sir. Another big part, and there are probably additional questions on this vein in the faculty meetings, another big part of the university president involves fundraising, both public and private. What skills and resources and ideas do you bring to the area of fundraising, again, for our foundation, but also to bring public money through the legislative process to New College?
Yes, thank you. Well, it really begins with what I was talking about before, making sure that New College's story is told well, it's curated, it is expressed in a very clear and cogent way. Perhaps the most striking experience that I have with fundraising was with the Queen of Spain, now the Emerita Queen of Spain, the Queen Sofia. And I had the privilege of holding the postdoctoral research position that was established by Queen Sofia. And just near the end of my tenure of that postdoc, I thought we could start some new initiatives with the Queen's backing. So I wrote to the palace, and she accepted my invitation. She came to Oxford for a dinner, and the result of that was that she endowed, well, her charity endowed a new fellowship, a new role for a faculty member to fill, to promote the teaching and study of Spanish. Again, that's probably the most striking example, but I think more broadly we need to be very diverse in our approach to fundraising. So thinking of supporting faculty as they apply for competitive grants from the state level, from the regional level, even going up to national competitive grants. Those are attainable, and they're attainable. They're more attainable with support from the institution. Private philanthropies, as you mentioned, I would be very eager to explore those possibilities.
Thank you. A big part of my job, obviously, as Dean of Students is student life. Two questions that aren't within my purview necessarily, but regarding student life. Two-part question, athletics in the intercollegiate variety. We'll start with that one. Do you support our efforts to join the NAIA and jump into intercollegiate sports? And how would you govern the athletic director and his prospects going forward with adding sports, recruiting athletes, et cetera?
Well, athletics and higher education is something that has evolved ever since the dawn of higher education. We can even think of the Greek gymnasium and how that corporal exercise was very closely related to the intellectual exercise. And it's a conversation that continues to evolve. Every year when I serve at the national level for the selection of the Rhodes Scholars, I have to think about the terms that Cecil Rhodes set out in his will when he set up that most famous of the international scholarships, now 120 years old. And he wrote that he wanted his scholars to embody a fondness for and participation in manly sport. Well, that clause actually had to be revised by an act of Parliament in the 1970s when they admitted women to the Rhodes Scholarship. But it's still a criterion. It's now been changed to phrases like physical vigor, energy to use one's talents to the full. But the old idea of a Rhodes Scholar being a varsity quarterback with a 4.0 persists. And so every year we have this conversation. And I support the idea that athletics can be very much an integral part of a university. Integral is key here because we don't want it to feel like a separate enterprise that is just an appendage to the college, but especially that those student athletes feel included and integrated into the broader activity that's going on at the college.
Thank you. Now, shifting gears a little bit to the intramural sports, and in particular at New College, the rec sports program that we have. Talk about your support and interest and ideas for those programs.
Certainly. Well, I think intramural, going back to the concept of access, that is a way to allow students to participate in sport without necessarily being the best in their class in their particular sport. And I was really interested to learn about the intramural sports that New College already had. I think some seem to have very long standing, like archery and powerlifting. And of course, the ones that reflect your geographic location, sailing and rowing. That's excellent. It would have my full support.
An interesting three-part question. I'll do it one at a time. What aspects of your background as an academic and as a Rhodes Scholar, you've touched on many, do you feel best contribute to your qualifications to lead New College and further develop our legacy of academic freedom and academic excellence?
Oh, there are many parts to that question. My British colleagues would have said you need to break that into 3 different questions on the exam. Let me take it part by part, if I may. So just the first part about my academic background, I think it's important that I would be able to speak with a high degree of understanding and sensitivity to faculty's priorities. I understand the pressure to publish and the pressure to engage in excellent teaching. That's what New College is all about. And so you attract faculty members who really value teaching, and yet they're still under professional pressures as well. So to help them navigate that. I think that answers the first part of the question, or at least addresses it. The second part about freedom of expression. When I was an undergraduate at University of Central Florida, this was in the early 2000s, and they still had free speech zones on campuses in Florida. Ours was a narrow triangle of grass. And I've always been an idealist, so I was out there with a picket sign that said, "The United States is a free speech zone." Well, eventually, 15 years later, the Florida legislature finally got the point. I don't think it was because of my individual protest, but I'm glad that we have in Florida the Campus Free Expression Act, because that enshrines what we want the campus to be. And that's especially important in the university context, because that's where ideas need to be debated most freely and most openly. On the other side of that coin, we want students to engage respectfully and professionally, because ultimately that will be to their good. They're learning how to adopt others' perspectives and act in a way that will allow them to do the same when they go out into the wider world.
Thank you. Sort of an open-ended question for you here. What makes you New College?
What makes me New College? I think I've already hinted at some of these things. Again, I'm very much a product of the Florida State University system. So students, I am in many senses one of you. I think, and I hope, that that would be inspiring to the students of New College as I identify with New College. And faculty members, I'm very much a Florida faculty member. Again, I've just touched on how I would be sensitive to their needs. And I've begun to wear administrative hats, so I know the pressures that that involves as well. With that, it allows me to bridge what has become, it seems, from an outsider's perspective, a cluster of factions that need to be brought together again. And I had opportunity to speak to this in my interview with the Board of Trustees, but my leadership would focus on integration, getting those communities to work together, not in unison. I think it's important to think about the word university itself, and although we are the smallest of the state universities, that word still has the root of turning, but it's turning as one. And so you can be turning in different directions, but ultimately, like the universe, you are turning as one coherent whole. And that's the vision that I would bring to New College.
Thank you. How would you best lead New College into its next era? What does the next era look like to you, in your mind, based on your understanding of an honors institution?
Right. Well, I thought long and hard about this, and I did read several of the past strategic plans for the college, and I want to respect those and also read them right alongside the founding mission of the college. And that deep thought about New College's identity and its next era, I was able to formulate for the students who are here present. You have it there on the handout as what? So I would envision New College as being America's leading mentorship university. I thought of this in the moment when we were interviewing with the Board of Trustees, but I think it's a way to package the concept of New College in a very accessible way for the broader public. Because sometimes the public doesn't understand, what do we mean by liberal arts? Does that have to do with political liberalism? Well, no, it has to do with something much more ancient, the idea of the best education that makes an effective free citizen. So to be America's leading mentorship university, that involves almost, well, really three parts. That kind of extramural outreach, to be the first choice of honors college for Florida students. And then for the students when they're here, that's where they're attaining that mastery. They're attaining new knowledge. And also for it to be a welcoming, dynamic home base for the alumni of the college, that they should still feel, if they wish to, still feel very much a part of the college. So that all of these different constituencies, the administration, the faculty, staff, students, alumni, and our community allies, who are very important, that they're working together for a common cause. That access to excellence in public higher education that I spoke of. And that's how we can be in our next era, America's leading mentorship university.
Thank you. You touched on many aspects of this next question, but I thought the last part of it was rather unique, so I'll just ask that part.
Okay.
What do you love most about New College?
I'm still getting to know New College. I still come very much with a listening attitude. I'm ready to learn a lot about New College. What do I love most is its potential. I find very inspiring. The potential that this college has, I think it has been underestimated several times in the past and currently, but it is a great potential that it possesses. And I was privileged to meet with a handful of students who happened to be here in August. I know most students are away from campus during the summer months, but I asked them first if they could keep one thing about New College in the midst of all this change, what would they keep? And they immediately said that tutorial, that small, intensive teaching, that individualized instruction, that student-led learning. And I thought, I can love that too. And if I were in their shoes, I would say the same thing.
It's indeed a unique place, and we appreciate your perspective there. The inverse of that, I guess. What do you feel about New College that needs to be changed? What are the biggest problems, and how would you go about addressing them?
Well, we've already talked about public perception. That would be very urgent. I wouldn't see it so much as a problem, but again, as a possibility, as a potential. I think there's a lot more opportunity for internationalization. I was looking at your study abroad webpage, and I was very encouraged at the existing study abroad opportunities. Those are fantastic. And the way that New College is already partnering with other institutions larger than New College to expand those opportunities further, but also to attract international students and attract some of the best to come and learn here at New College. You know, one of the caricatures that's being thrown right now in the media is that that New College, I can't yet speak as we, but that New College is becoming some kind of elitist or fascistic or right-wing extremist college. And of course we know here that that's not true. But one of the best ways, and perhaps one of the most direct ways to combat that, is to focus on that internationalization. Make sure that there are a very wide array of international students represented and our students going out to a wide array of destinations.
You're answering questions that are upcoming that I haven't yet asked, so thank you.
We can talk about it more.
No problem. You can see the limited attendance today. How would you as president engage more to make this a family, encourage faculty and staff and students to attend events like this and become more engaged?
It's a perennial problem at campuses, and New College is not unique in this regard. It's 9 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, and I think probably a lot of students are in class right now, or they're preparing for classes right now. So again, I thank the students who are here present for taking that extra effort. And that really is the crux of the matter, that students and faculty, in order to be involved in an event like this, they have to be invested in it, they have to see the value in it to them. And so in any way that we can support students and faculty coming to an event like this and make it feel more of a shared enterprise. And that can be done innovatively. Let's say you're setting up a lecture series and you want to invite big names in. Make sure that that's not a top-down initiative, that you allow faculty members to host that event, to take turns inviting speakers of their choice, and then they can put it on their CV. They're engaged in the wider intellectual conversation that they're already engaged in. It's a chance for them to showcase what they're doing. That's one instance that comes off the top of my head, that it shouldn't be a kind of top-down initiative, but that needs to be more organic, coming up from the expertise that we already have here. And the same thing goes for students. Again, if I may reference my transition from being a Florida student to being an Oxford student, I was an RA here in Florida for 3 years, and one of the challenges was always to get students to come to the events that we would put on. And I'm afraid to say we almost always had to lure them with free pizza. Well, that's not ideal. We want the value to be inherent in the event, and the pizza, let that be an afterthought. You know, if we have the funds, that's great. But I think we want to make sure that the events are valuable and to convey that value to students or faculty who would attend. When I went to Oxford, I was blown away by the fact that all the student activities were just generated by the students. There wasn't a student, if I may pardon, there wasn't a student affairs coordinator. There wasn't a dean of students that was trying to put on the events for the students. They gave the venue, and the students went with it. And they came up with all kinds of creative things, like a Christmas scavenger hunt that they created a small documentary that allowed the students to get to meet some of the kitchen staff that they would never have otherwise interacted with. And this was completely a student-led initiative. And that creates the kind of personal investment and buy-in for anyone involved. So I would like to try to replicate that kind of thing here.
Well, I appreciate your recognition of class, which is, of course, the priority here of attending. But also, we'll say in defense of the students not in attendance, there is no shortage of activism on this campus of students, and I think it's one of the great qualities of New College, and I commend our students both here and absent from this meeting. Excellent. For their engagement in activism. And as well, I might speak for the students, if I may, and say that no one here would ever dissuade you, if you were to become president, from offering free food to our students. So.
I know, even as a faculty member, I still take advantage of free food.
Indeed, I think I represent the faculty in that statement as well, so thank you.
But, you know, if I may just add on that, I think there are so many creative ways that the university could help the students and faculty to integrate and interact in a more informal manner. That could be in the case, it could be something like subsidized partially or fully faculty meal plans so that faculty are encouraged to eat alongside students. Again, I kind of have the ideal of the Oxford dining hall where you are eating, carrying on those conversations together. Make sure that faculty have enough parking and are not paying parking fees so that, again, they're encouraged to spend as much time on campus with the students. This is, after all, Florida's residential liberal arts honors college. And that first term, that first descriptor, residential, is so important, that it should be a living, learning community.
Oxford obviously has had a profound impact on you academically and personally, we can tell. What motivated you originally? This is a selfish question from me. What motivated you initially to go through the process, the application process, to become a Rhodes Scholar?
Oh, well, that's quite a story in itself. I'll try to tell it briefly. Dr. Jayashree Shivamogi was my advisor, even though she was a physics professor at University of Central Florida. And she simply, I'd never heard of the Rhodes Scholarship. And she stood up in a freshman symposium that all the honors freshmen attended. And she just said, have you all heard of the Rhodes Scholarship and the Marshall Scholarship? And I'm thinking, no, I've never heard of it. And she said, it's not too early to start thinking about these. So I looked up what it was, and I saw, well, these are the criteria that they're looking for. And I thought, this is far out of my reach. It was out of my reach as a freshman. But I thought, this will shape, and this is what I tell students to this day, think of it as whatever you do, whatever the outcome, I should say, it will serve you well to think about shaping your choices over the next 3 or 4 years as an undergraduate. Because there's so many opportunities that you can get involved in, but you only have so many hours in the day. And so to strategize and think, I'll choose this over this, or I'll choose sustained engagement with my one driving passion. At the end of 3 or 4 years, that allows you to tell a more persuasive and more compelling narrative of what you're doing and what you aspire to do. So it was basically through Dr. J, as she calls herself, Dr. Jayashree Shivamogi's support. And this actually also touches on that kind of organic, allow the students free rein. They are, after all, high-achieving young adults. Treat them as such. Treat the faculty as professionals. We hire them as professionals, and sometimes we forget that they are very much so, and they remain so. But Dr. J would just invite students to come to her office every Friday morning for a couple of hours, and we would debate current affairs that were going on in the world. I wouldn't have otherwise developed the habit of reading international press, from The Economist to The Telegraph to The Guardian, and looking at different perspectives, Al Jazeera, and being able to comment on what's going on in our world. But also on those Friday mornings to begin to see other students who were a little bit further along in the process. They were drafting their scholarship applications. No one was required to attend these meetings. We didn't gain any credit from them. And so it took that kind of initial initiative. That's part of my vision as an educator, to cultivate that.
Thank you. A specific question on New College of Florida policy currently. Do you support the Board of Trustees' recent decision to terminate the gender studies area of concentration? If so, why or why not?
Yeah, thank you. This is a very difficult question, and I was here in person when that decision was taken. Let me begin by saying that one of the most valuable courses that I took as an undergraduate was an honors seminar called Women and Aging. I was very interested at the time in geriatric education. I was teaching at a local assisted living care facility. And I was fascinated by the way that this team-taught seminar brought concepts from women's studies right alongside gerontology. And neither of those were my field, but bringing those fields together in an interdisciplinary way was very, very rich. The president serves at the behest of the Board of Trustees. So on the one hand, I respect that decision, and I can see cases to be made on both sides. I think if I were to speak in support of it, in support of phasing out, because it shouldn't be done all at once, but phasing out gender studies as an area of concentration, it would be that you have things like area studies or things like gender studies that can be done without having a specific degree program for them. And I thought that Professor Amy Reed was very wise when she recently said to the student press, they can't abolish ideas. Students, you are pursuing the liberal arts, and you're able to study history and apply it to questions of gender. You're able to study economics and apply it to questions of gender, and across the various disciplines. So I would support the board, but I would encourage the students to still pursue their ideas, because no one's limiting you to do that. So gain your mastery of psychology, and then go deep into the psychology of gender. That would be the next step in your education, for example.
Thank you. You and I share a background of large university degrees. In your view, what differentiates or makes special New College, the liberal arts, versus a large university in the state of Florida to a prospective in-state applicant?
Certainly. Well, I've talked a lot about my background at what was for several years the largest university in the country, currently is not, but University of Central Florida, a huge enrollment figure. Right now it's nearly 70,000. What made that work for me was the Burnett Honors College. That is the Honors College of UCF. And so I see New College as, well, it is an honors college, but what makes it unique is that it is an autonomous entity in its own right. You see, at the Burnett Honors College, we rely on faculty to teach the seminars and the courses and all the various activities that the college does in teaching. But those faculty have other obligations to their home departments. And here you can much more readily integrate those different obligations.
Thank you. Another question, from a student, how will you work to rebuild students' trust and engagement in the administration, and how will you work to ensure students have safe housing?
Oh, another two-part question. I can see how it's interrelated, though, just from what I've read in the press. I would simply underscore again that this being the residential Honors College of Florida, those residences and their safety are of utmost priority. And because that residential honors college was established by state statute, New College has a right to ask for additional funds to make sure that its residences are of top quality in terms of safety, in terms of livability. That is one thing that's damaged trust, and I appreciate that question of how you would restore that trust between the students. Is that the question, between the students and the administration?
Primarily,
or just
yes.
generally across the communities? For me, I think there's a lot of, this may sound simplistic, but you have 700 students. There's no reason not to communicate directly with them, to consult with them, to talk through major decisions that are coming up. My honors college at UCF has roughly 3 times the student enrollment here. And yet we're able to communicate to those students about important matters. There's even a representative student body called Honors Congress that feed their ideas back to the administration and faculty of the Honors College. If that can be done at an honors college of roughly 2,300 students plus, it could certainly be done here. And so I begin by restoring trust by being a very active presence, engaging in that plurality, that vibrant plurality of ideas and activism that you mentioned earlier exists here. That's a hallmark of New College, and I hope to support it. And to show that the students that you are personally, as president, invested in their success. They're going to go on from New College, they're going to go on to great success. And so I think I mentioned in my handout even championing alumni success stories, championing current student success stories, making sure that those are translated to a broader public very effectively.
Thank you. We've got time for 2 or 3 more questions. And this one is actually, it isn't clear whether this is a town and gown question or an incoming versus returning student, so perhaps you can address it from both directions. Describe your strategy in building relations between the established NCF community and the incoming and new members and other members of the community.
I understand from the media that New College had a record incoming class in terms of numbers this year, and also a large number of students departing. And so that makes for a lot of tension amongst the students who have chosen to stay, and this sudden large influx of students. Perhaps a simple way to address the matter would go back to the design as a residential institution, not housing year groups separately, making sure that they are integrated. I think I'm hammering away at this theme of integration, but that involves physical, spatial integration as well as intellectual and active integration. So that would be one practical way to address the matter. And I was actually very encouraged to read in the student newspaper, The Catalyst, about some of the student initiatives to make sure that those incoming students, whether they're transfer or first time in college, that they're made to feel very welcome. And I think there was an event just recently I wasn't able to attend, but I thought this is just the kind of thing that you need to do. It was returning students who were putting on a program to explain the history and culture of New College to incoming students. I wish someone had done that for me as a freshman at a very much larger institution, because that's, again, a very practical but very hands-on way to make those students feel a part of this place.
I would echo that and compliment our student leaders, both in student government and in our various clubs, for welcoming our new students, and also our new students for engaging in many of these clubs and going through that process of getting to know one another. It's very important, so thank you. Very specific question. What would be your goals for the first 60 days of your administration?
First 60 days, well, that's almost an entire semester, if I'm not mistaken. So a little under 3 months. So in my first 60 days as New College president, again, I may use my handout as a crutch, but I've laid it out there with extramural strategies and intramural strategies, and they all point towards the major goals. Sorry, was it goals or was it strategies?
60 days, either way, your choice.
All right. So I've mentioned already the priority to address public perception, and this needs to be done with marketing that is not standard marketing. New College of Florida is an unconventional place, and so we need to engage in some unconventional marketing very actively, not just tell the faculty and students, oh, tell us about your research, tell us about your athletic success, but actually proactively go and seek out those stories and then work with, and sometimes you might have the shyest students producing the most brilliant work. The next Emily Dickinson could be studying here at New College right now. And so that takes a very special kind of staff member, whether it's from the marketing team or otherwise, to, if I may use the word again, to curate that information for the broader public. So this has to do with that extramural public perception engagement. And that serves to attract prospective students as well as speak to prospective donors, community allies, as I mentioned before, to be able to tell that New College story. That has to be done very proactively. I would also in those 60 days look consultatively, but look very closely at the academic standards for admissions and for progress, for academic progress through the degree. Because if we are to be Florida's honors college, we need to maintain those standards and look at what the academic admission standards are for other honors colleges in the state. We need to at least be in line with them. So that would be something to investigate from the very beginning. I would also look into very proactive ways of using New College facilities as a way to do things that, I won't call them simple because they're very complicated to execute, but to host things like the Florida State Science and Engineering Fair, the Math Olympiad, Poetry Out Loud, these various STEM and humanities engagements that a lot of high school students, especially the kind that we want to attract, would get into. Partly I ended up going to UCF because I went to science fair there when I was in high school. And it was the first time that I'd been on such a university campus, and I thought, wow, this is what university can be. So we can reach those students that might not otherwise have a clear idea of what university is. And I don't want to ramble, but those are some of the, again, the very practical strategies that I would implement in those first 60 days, serving that wider vision, that broader vision of being America's leading mentorship university.
Thank you. I profess punctuality, time management, but also good manners. So let me try to do all three of those in 130 seconds. Give you the opportunity to offer any closing remarks you'd like to make to our students. And again, thank our students for being here today.
Yes, well, thank you very much, David. This has only been a 45-minute forum, and of course it has been a mediated forum. And so I would first like to remember to say that I invite students to come and meet with me more informally at the Hamilton Center today between 12 noon and 2 p.m. I would really look forward to listening to you there. And in closing, I would really just underscore what makes me a unique candidate for this position. I've spoken a lot about how I went up through the Florida State University system. I'm very much a product of it. I understand where students are. Florida is my home, and I also understand the faculty and the administrators. And so I can bridge these different communities. So bridge building would be a major part of my approach, but it's also what I can do because of who I am.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. We appreciate you coming here today and wish you all the luck in the process ahead.
Thank you very much, David.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, students.